Well, yesterday in our Wonderful Day in the Lord broadcast, we were looking at this issue of God's sovereignty and our responsibilities, and whether or not God could change his mind, which we do not find in Scripture. He is immutable, he is unchangeable, and our responses and our choices do not change God. Nothing changes God. God is, like I said, immutable and he's sovereign. But people have struggled with that, and so they've tried to come up with different ideas to relieve the tension in their own mind. And one of the ways that has gained a lot of traction in the last few decades is that issue of open theism, the idea that God does not know all things. Now, let me back up for just a moment and give the traditional, what I believe the biblical understanding of this issue is. God is sovereign. He is majestic and glorified. God's will is the final explanation for all things that happens. God's glory is the ultimate purpose for what he creates all things for. Whatever he decrees comes to pass, and nothing can thwart his will. Nothing can hinder the accomplishment of his purposes. This, I believe, is taught clearly in the Scriptures. We don't always understand all the nuances and how that all fits together with the choices of human beings and responsibility, but that is taught in Scripture, and the majority of Christians believe some aspect of that. Open theism, however, challenges all those tenets that I have just brought to your attention. And so the major thing is this: God is not knowable of the future. God just doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. He doesn't know that because he doesn't know what choices you and I and all of humanity might make that would change his plans, and he would have to respond to those things. So that's the basic idea behind open theism. And the purpose of open theism by those who have created it is to guard the integrity of God. If God knows all things, God is sovereignly in control of all things, then a lot of things are happening that just don't seem to match up with who God is. And so in order to protect, supposedly, the integrity of God, they've come up with a system in which God knows the future only to the degree that he's decreed it. And God knows all things in the past perfectly, and he knows all things that are happening at this moment perfectly, but he cannot know with absolute certainty what's going to happen tomorrow in your life, in the world's situation. He doesn't know, for example, who is going to win the election that's coming up in November. God is very resourceful, and God is very wise, obviously. And God can look at the hearts of people and the minds of people in ways that we never could, or no pollster could. But he is nevertheless unable to predict with absolute certainty anything that's going to happen in the future. So there are major components to open theism. Let me mention 4 of them, and you can study this more deeply if you want to. If you go to our website at tottministries.org, I have 4 articles on open theism that can give you a much more comprehensive understanding. But here are 4 major components of open theism. Number 1, God is not sovereign. He is not always and necessarily in control of all things. His will can be thwarted. It apparently was thwarted by the devil in the Garden of Eden. It can be thwarted by sinful people. It can be thwarted by you and I if we don't do his will. And so God's will can be thwarted. He is not sovereign. Number 2, God therefore is at risk. God can make mistakes. He can set something in order and process that backfires on him. And so God is ultimately at risk of allowing things to happen. He puts people in places and roles and so forth, but it may not work out as God wanted to. And so to some degree, God is at the mercy of his creatures, their choices, and their actions. Thirdly, God's limited in knowledge. As I've already said, he doesn't know the future with certainty. He has a lot of wisdom. He has a lot of input, and he knows things about the future that we can't comprehend because of his vast knowledge and wisdom. But he is not mutable. He's subject to time. He's not a God who lives outside of time. He's subject to time. And so he cannot know what might change tomorrow that might change his plan and so forth. So God's knowledge is limited. He doesn't know. And finally, his ultimate purpose is not to glorify himself. It is to give and receive love. That is his ultimate purpose. Now, when we put all this together with open theism, we have a God who's fickle, a God who can't know, a God who can't control, a God who's at the mercy of his creatures in creation. We don't have a sovereign God who rules over his universe. That is a very anemic, sad picture of God. I would hate to believe that God exists, and he does not. The God of Scripture is sovereign, in control, and ultimately brings all things to glorify him and to fulfill the purposes for which he's created. I hope this is helpful in our understanding of who God is.